a minute or two after 1 o'clock. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what area of the country you're in. Welcome to the 5 common pitfalls in estate planning drafting. My name is Scott Williams, and I've been an estate planning attorney for the past 34 years. And I can tell you with my experience, there's a lot of challenges that we as professionals face when it comes to document drafting. The good news, at least, is that there are solutions to those challenges, and that's what we really like to focus on today. We have about 25 minutes or so of presentation content, and then we'll be happy to open up to any questions anyone may have at the end of the presentation. So before we jump in, I'd like to introduce my co-presenters. First is Anja Saralahadi. Anja, can you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm super happy to be here. So I'm originally an attorney, and I transitioned my practice to legal technology consulting. So I've been building document automation systems for law firms for the past 3 years, and I've built with Scott and Susan the technology behind Cloud Estate Plan on Gavel.
Great. Thanks, Anja. Susan, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm also super excited to be here. Thank you for attending. My history with estate planning goes back probably close to 30 years. I used to work at a financial services firm, and I needed a legal partner to work with my clients on estate planning. And that's how I met Scott those many decades ago. And he hired me into his law firm to begin his estate plan maintenance program way back 25 years ago. And at the time, we actually didn't have the technology solutions that we needed to support that program. So we started a software company to develop those. And I've been here since day one for 27 years.
Great. Thanks, Susan. I guess in terms of opening comments, I think when it comes to document drafting, there's really 2 primary challenges that we as professionals face. So one issue is as practitioners, we always want to be certain that our documents are accurate, they're correct. We don't want to be in situations where, for whatever reason, clauses got missed or things didn't get included in the document that needed to be included, because it obviously opens up some opportunities for some malpractice exposure. But I think the other competing challenge as a business owner, and the reality is the practice of law is a business, and there's no mission without margin. And we need to figure out ways that we can be very economical with our time that we need to invest in document drafting, and yet still have a highly accurate system. And so that was really our primary objective in developing Cloud Estate Plan, was to first to identify and then eliminate the inefficiencies that so often I find when we get into document drafting. We tend to fall back on cut and paste methods, and we look at the last document we drafted for a client in a similar situation, and we just start doing a search and replace to the document. It's incredibly time intensive and just as riddled with opportunities for errors to find their way into that process. So we're really excited. We've been working for over a year on the Cloud Estate Plan document drafting system. And I think we've got some really good workable solutions for estate planning practitioners. So why don't we jump in and we'll take a look at the first big obstacle that we face. And I can tell you that for me, it has always been a lack of standard templates. And I often would find that I would have take a will, for example. There'd be a master document for a single person with kids, a single person without children, single person with minor kids, married couples, and the whole list goes on. And so it got to be really challenging. As laws would change, I'd have to go literally into each one of these templates and make sure that I was moving that boilerplate technical legal language forward, which really became very time intensive. But it also ran the risk that there might be a mistake or an error when you're re-entering that data 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Sometimes that monotony can lead itself to just an omission where you just skip something. So we never want to be in a situation where stuff gets left out. But I think the other big challenge that we have seen in this area is that when we have documents that have been edited, so often it's very easy to save an edited master template back to that master file, not even realizing that you saved something that's now been edited, and then you pick up that edited template and use it again for the next client, not realizing that things have been either been removed or have been changed. So that's one of our, I guess, our big challenges that we try to look at in the practice is coming up with a centralized source of pre-built templates that you have some high level of confidence in knowing that the language is going to be consistent from one client to the next. We don't have to worry about someone else in the law firm may have opened that template, edited it, and then the next thing we know, that became the new master moving forward for every client. So these are just the realities that we face. And the challenge, of course, is figuring out a way to keep all that stuff centralized and consistent as we move forward. So here's a good example that we looked at, just kind of looking at what my typical hard drive would be with a simple will. There'd be all kinds of different versions, and that really makes it challenging for other folks in the firm if you're in a practice where there's more than one attorney, or perhaps you even have a paralegal or some other professional team members that assist you in that document drafting process, as making sure that they're using the right template for that particular client and their background. And so as we developed Cloud Estate Plan, that was one of the primary objectives, was to have a list of all the various documents that we typically would use in counseling clients on more of a foundational will-based estate plan, and then have those documents work off of a master set of templates where the logic is behind it to drive the appropriate provisions into that document based on whatever the circumstances are. But I think the other concern that I would run into in this area is you get these occasional one-offs, something that doesn't happen very often but becomes an issue. A good example comes to mind. I met with a client recently. One of the questions I had asked her as we were doing that initial counseling and design was, have you made any significant gifts to the kids? And there was one child that she had made some significant, she called them gifts. The child had fallen into some hard times and she wanted to help them out. And my concern on that is, has that been communicated to the other children that this was in fact a gift and it was not to be considered an advance on this child's inheritance? And so I wanted to have some way to memorialize that. So, I can tell you when I first started practicing out, when I was a much younger person, estate planning was very academic. I knew in theory what was supposed to happen, but it's not until you actually have clients that have died where you really get to stress test how effective that plan is. And I know I see the counseling I provide clients today in designing and setting up estate plans very differently with that experience of over 3 decades of seeing where are the opportunities for things to go wrong. So one of the documents you'll see in our list of available documents is a memorandum that memorializes lifetime gifts. And do we want to treat those transfers to that child as a gift, or should it be considered as an advance on the inheritance? If it is a gift, it should be appropriately documented. But the reality is no client comes in, sits down in your conference room and says, I'd like you to design an estate plan that's going to destroy my children's relationships. And unfortunately, many estate plans will do just that. And there's missed expectations between the client and their children or whoever their beneficiaries are. Often there's just minimum information that's been shared. And so to the extent that we can, we want to try to include ways to document the intent of the client as we're going through that design process. So that brings us up to our second challenge.
So moving on to the second challenge, we wanted to address in just ahead of drafting, but also that affects the drafting process, is the client intake process. And there are some things that are specific to client intake in estate planning, which is that a lot of the client intake part is heavy with collecting biographical data. So we found that one of the things that made the drafting process inefficient, or the beginning of the process inefficient, is to have attorneys sit down with clients and have to collect biographical data, which really it's not the best value or the best use of the time for the attorney to sit down and collect addresses and social security numbers. And then we also have the issue where not everyone does client intakes the same way. So some people might do client intake on the phone, some people do client meetups, some people send a PDF to their client that they get back, and then they have to do data entry after that PDF. Some people have an online form. So we have that issue ahead of drafting where client intake is not standardized. So it was really a priority in terms of how we built the solution at Cloud Estate Plan, that we have an integrated client intake, and that client intake is very simplified so that it could be used by a lot of different firms, because it's a very minimal client intake. It's a client intake that is meant to collect really just the biographical data so that you have ahead of filling up the questionnaire in the actual drafting process. So you have all of the contacts information, all of the client's information, all of the spouse information. And that really allows you to not spend your time doing follow-up and to make sure you have all of the information that you need about your client ahead of drafting. Because oftentimes you can realize at some point you're missing the address for a child and have to go back and send an email, and then you realize you're missing a social security number. So having all of that data ready to go before you start drafting really is a game changer, and it's also a better use of your attorney time or of your team time rather than spending it on administrative tasks or following up after clients. So we have a quick demo of how the client intake is meant to function in Cloud Estate Plan. So I'm just gonna mute this. So basically, as an attorney, you can use the client intake and send a client intake to your client through our platform. And then what you saw right here is what your client would receive, which is that you as an attorney sent or shared a secure client intake with them. And then your client is going to complete their version of the client intake. So they're going to enter their personal information. They're going to enter their spouse information, their children information, and any key contact that they want to populate or potentially use as agents or fiduciaries in the process. And we made it so that this is integrated fully into our system at Cloud Estate Plan, so that once that client intake is completed and received back by you, the attorney, that will populate the actual drafting questionnaire in Cloud Estate Plan, in the solution. So that kind of transitions us towards the third challenge, which is duplicate data entry, just because this is one way to not do duplicate data entry. If you were doing client intake another way, you would potentially have to re-enter your data into Cloud Estate Plan, the solution, once you're ready. So you would have to copy your data from that PDF intake and then enter it. We didn't want to have that. So we made sure that our client intake data integrates fully into our solution.
Okay, so that brings us up to our third challenge, the duplicate data entry. And as Anja mentioned, that often creates at least an opportunity for things to be entered inconsistently. And there's nothing more frustrating when you run into those types of situations. I think the hurdles that we often face on this is that I can certainly remember many times where clients have given us information, especially if it's handwritten. It can be really challenging to have to be a forensic detective and try and figure out exactly, is that an L or a 1 in that email address? So having the client being given that ability to do the data entry really helps to reduce the potential risk of literally misinterpreting information they've provided in a handwritten format and then being able to move that directly into the document drafting system. I think the other concern that I sometimes have run into, and maybe you folks have seen this too, where the clients have given you information on a particular beneficiary, and I always kind of chuckle. I can recall a few situations where I'd sit down with the client, we review documents, and they'll say, "Oh, well, you spelled my child's name wrong," and I literally look at the information they've given us when they've filled out the personal information forms. And it actually was accurate based on what the client gave us. The client gave us the wrong information. And of course, those things have to be changed. And that's been an ongoing challenge, and to have to make sure that you're remembering, well, how many of the documents do I need to go back in and modify that child because the child's name is spelled incorrectly or the birth date was wrong. It makes it really easy to unfortunately overlook something. And now you've got an inconsistency issue again. And that was part of what we wanted to, in our development process, was to make sure we had the capability where if you needed to go into the data set, make a change in a name or a birth date or some other biographical information, that it immediately populated and updated that information across all of the documents, where you don't have to go in document by document, drill down and make those changes manually.
So we do have a short demo of the data entry portion into Cloud Estate Plan. Some of you may already be familiar with the importance people's list method, but this is where your client's intake or contact that they have inputted will be automatically pushed. And then also everything starts, like Scott said, from the client intake. So if you need to change any or edit any biographical data, then you can just jump back into your intake and edit from that importance people's list, and then regenerate your documents if you need to update anything. That will make sure that all of your information across the different documents gets updated accordingly, and there is no mismatch between your PO, power of attorney, and your will, for example, just because you forgot to update it. And we really made sure that the intake was optimized based on the importance people's list, so that we always populate every role from the intake from that original list. So you don't need to enter the information regarding the same person twice in this intake. You will always source back from that original importance people's list that will output into all of your documents. So we really make sure across the board that information and that data stays consistent, so you don't have to enter it twice, and so that doesn't create the potential for duplicates or for errors when updating after.
Anja, we had a question that came in from Azul, and the question was, one of my challenges with intakes for couples is that only one spouse tends to complete the intake, and then they have to manually enter it for the second spouse. And how do we get around that problem? And so that, I think the answer to that is when the client-facing intake is given to a married couple, for example, it's going to ask for data on both spouses, all the kids. So it's not limited to just that particular spouse, because typically we're going to be representing both spouses most of the time with estate planning. And so it really wouldn't matter which spouse completed the client-facing data entry. Either one of them could do it, but they would be prompted to enter data for both themselves and their spouse, as well as any of the beneficiaries, or potentially any individuals that might be named in some capacity as an executor or trustee or POA agent, what have you.
And then to complete Scott's answer, when it comes to the actual internal questionnaire for drafting, it's the same structure. So if you're a married couple, you're filling this up for both spouses. And when you're at the stage of generating the documents on Cloud Estate Plan, you can choose which client you want to generate the document for. So you can generate for client 1, and then you can generate for client 2. But the actual intake is meant to collect both information into the same data session. We don't have a separate data session for each spouse. It's really merged into one. So that really allows to reuse some of the same information whenever you need it.
Agreed. That brings us up to our fourth challenge, inconsistent drafting outputs from delegation. And I think any attorney is going to look to find ways that they can better leverage their time and do the things that truly are your unique abilities, whether it's working with clients or providing counseling and helping folks guided through that decision-making process. But I've always found it frustrating when we've tried to develop systems that we want to not only have be effective for the attorney, but also for their professional staff, their team members, whether it's a paralegal, whether it's another associate attorney, a law clerk. My experience is that the more technical, legal terminology that we use in the workflows and asking for data entry, the more challenging it is for that team member to be able to understand what is the information that's supposed to be going into this section of the workflow. And so however you manage to capture your meeting notes from the design sessions with clients, that's going to have to be re-entered into the software. So we've tried to be very intentional in the workflow to keep the workflow in simple English and also support all of the questions in the workflow with detailed help screens so that a user could pick that up. And if they weren't sure what was intended to go in a particular space, they could look at the help screen content and get some direction. So that the goal is always to try to minimize the amount of training time and make the product as intuitive as possible.
So in terms of that specific challenge, as Scott said, we really wanted to make the intake experience consistent and with proper guidance. And the goal really is that the outputs that we get from Cloud Estate Plan are predictable and accurate. No matter who is going to draft on the system, you will get consistent outputs. So if Susan draft, if Scott's draft is going to draft, then the output I'm going to get is the same accurate, predictable output. And so that makes it a lot more easy to actually review those documents, which is our fifth challenge, which is time-consuming document review. And those two challenges kind of transition and complete each other, but the two solutions complete each other, but it's usually difficult to identify what's missing or the optional fields or what you want to review quickly once you're done with your document automation process. We wanted to make sure to have a way to flag what's missing very quickly. So we had added into Cloud Estate Plan a way to be able to flag the missing fields or optional fields. So let's say when you're filling up your intake, you still don't know who's going to be the successor guardian or the successor attorney, and you need to generate a first draft of those documents to be able to see them. But you want to complete that information maybe later on manually. We wanted to make sure that those things did not get missed, and that there was a quick, efficient way to be able to flag those so that it's not left for manual review or a mental note in your head to come back to it. So we really wanted to integrate that directly into the solution, where we wanted to leave people with the ability of leaving some fields blank so that it doesn't stop them in the actual intake. So that gives you enough flexibility if you need to generate the documents. But we also wanted to make sure that we don't miss anything in that process in doing that. So what we made sure to do is to have those flags in the output documents if fields are left empty, those highlights, those yellow flags, so that you know what to complete if you wanted to complete anything manually after the drafting process. So that pretty much wraps up the different challenges we wanted to address in Cloud Estate Plan.
We have another question, Anja.
Yeah.
Regarding, is the software tethered to any particular state? And so the answer is kind of a yes and a no. Right now, we started off with more of a generic application of the software. We're in the process of adding additional state-specific documents. The The primary documents that tend to be impacted by state-specific laws would be your advanced directives for healthcare, whether it's a healthcare proxy, living will, and so forth, and then statutory financial powers of attorneys. So part of that, we're actually working as we're getting users in a particular state that say, I need to be able to draft a healthcare power of attorney for Michigan, or I need one for Massachusetts or Ohio. We're adding those in really on a first come, first served basis. And if we have users that have a particular need for it, it's not a real difficult process to get that added. We've also been very intentional in designing the documents to enhance your ability to include custom provisions. Sometimes I've seen where I've looked at a document and I said, okay, that looks pretty good, but here in Ohio, I need to have a special provision for the rule against perpetuities, or you pick your favorite clause. And so we've added, I call them customization hotspots, where you can literally go in and add custom provisions in maybe a little bit beyond our discussion today, but there's ways that you can create essentially a sample set of data that pre-selects all of those language options you want to have included in the various documents, so that you don't have to go back in and manually re-enter those each time. You just start with with your pre-populated data set that is specific to your practice, and you're up and running. Another question that came in: can Cloud Estate Plan compile a data list or question list to give clients so they know all information documents they'll need at hand as they start inputting data in the online form? Yes, we actually are in the process now of having, we call them input forms, and you can use them in really different ways. I know I tend to be more of the hands-on, more old-fashioned, I guess, type, where I like to sit down with clients and have a checklist of things to go through and ask them about when I go through that counseling design. And so it's often the clients will give me information. I can put that right onto the input form and then give that to a paralegal to do the drafting off of. The other option is you could actually give that input form to the client and let them think through some of those things and come up with what information they want to have included. But what I think we've really been, part of our mission has been to build a lot of flexibility, not only into the software, but the counseling tools, so that you have the ability to use the product that fits your style, your process, what's most efficient for you. Great.
Scott, can I chime in here?
Please jump right in, Susan.
I wanted to mention something because I provide a lot of the direct support and help for people who are interested in finding out about how to use our product, if it's a good fit, once they're a user, how to do certain things. And one of the things that comes up often is built-in efficiencies. So we may not have mentioned this as clearly as we should have, but there is a screen for you to enter the professional people that serve as notaries, witnesses, the attorney in the software. So you put them in a single list, and then you can reuse them when those questions come up in the interview, so that if your witness and your notary happen to be the same paralegal, you'll have entered their information one time and have that be able to be populated into the interview as you're completing the interview. The second thing, and it came up with a current user of ours asking about how he could integrate common scenarios into the software, so that if he always does similar things with single clients or with blended families or with married clients in his state, how could he build efficiencies around those common scenarios? So you can create in our system a template for certain scenarios with your clients, and then have that information already entered into your Cloud Estate Plan database, so that you can then push it into a custom client file. So it's already pre-populated with many of those selections, and then you're filling out your custom client biographical information around them, further leveraging the efficiencies of the system. So I wanted to make sure that we mention that, so that people know that there are tips and tricks for even improving the speed. The other day I was with this gentleman on the phone, just showing him how that could be done, and we drafted a trust in a matter of 10 minutes. I mean, it was a very quick I'm sorry, not trust, a will-based plan in the matter of 10 minutes. So it was a very quick drafting process with a high degree of predictability and accuracy that even someone who is not a highly trained and learned attorney, somebody who is a paralegal could very quickly get on this bike and start pedaling, and it would work for them. So I just wanted to mention those
It's
things.
been pretty consistent, my experience too, Susan. It's about 10 to 15 minutes on average, depending on the complexity of the data that you're entering and the options that you want to have included. But I think that's the real key is I want to be able to get the data entered. I want the documents to come out quick, and I want to be able to move on to my next client meeting or whatever the next project is I'm working on. I realize I'm in the document drafting business, but I really don't like to draft documents. I like to have that stuff automated and be freed up to do the things I really enjoy, and that's actually working with people.
And just to mention, to be able to draft a trust in 10 or 15 minutes, a will in 10 or 15 minutes, a will-based plan with 12 documents is pretty remarkable. And, right now our subscription is $150 per month. We wanted to price it at a price point where it was a high value proposition for people. It's a great tool to have in your toolkit. And you could draft and pay for itself with one will-based plan a month, make it very affordable for people to do it, and give them the high degree of quality that people need in the marketplace.
Great. Well, I think that brings us through all of the content we wanted to share, and I don't see any other questions that are being posted. So we will go ahead and bring our webinar to a close today. On behalf of Anja and Susan, myself, thank you for taking time to be with us today and for checking us out. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to us. You'll see contact information and the little QR code. You can contact Susan and get more information if you'd like to explore this opportunity in more detail. So thanks.
I just want to add, I'm going to add, so Gavel is, so Cloud Estate Plan is really a separate subscription from Gavel. So if you want to subscribe to Cloud Estate Plan, you can use the code Gavel20, which is the code that we're offering to Gavel users who want to try Cloud Estate Plan, to get 20% off your first 3 months of subscription. So you can use that code until November 15th. If you're not familiar with Gavel and you want to try Gavel yourself, then you can also use the Gavel link, the free trial link that I added on this slide to try Gavel yourself. So if you want to sign up and give Cloud Estate Plan a try, you can use the QR code on the screen. And we're happy to assist and help with any other questions that you might have on.
So Anja, can I just help people to clarify a little bit more about what you say? Gavel is included with Cloud Estate Plan when you subscribe to Cloud Estate Plan, correct? It is not a separate purchase. If you currently aren't a Gavel user and are interested in just using Cloud Estate Plan, that would be included, Gavel, with your subscription, and you could use the Gavel 20 code to receive 20% off and not be a Gavel user.
Yeah, you don't need to be a Gavel user to be a Cloud Estate Plan user.
And someone did put in the chat, does Cloud Estate Plan draft trust? It does not at this time, though that is something that we're considering right now. It's primarily a will-based plan.
And then the other question was, does the platform create a way for clients to download online documents? And are the documents stored in the cloud, and for how long? Anja, did you want to take that one?
So since we are built on Gavel, we have the same data retention feature. So if you need to delete the data about your clients, you will have to do so manually yourself. So if your policy is to store your client's data for up to 6 months, then you will have to go in manually into the system and delete the session data after 6 months. If it's 2 years, then you'll have to do so manually, but there is no automatic way to delete session data at the moment.
Are the merged documents then stored in the cloud?
Yes, they are. They are stored on the platform.
Got it.
And they do come out in both PDF format and in .docx, which is a Windows Word-based format. So they can be emailed to your client provided that way if need be.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. It's enjoyed having the time together, and look forward to hopefully seeing folks at some point down the road. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.